Europos reakcija į ekstremalius meteorologinius reiškinius.
Portugal, Süditalien, Malta und Griechenland. Und ich begrüße Frau Kommissarin Lavib und gebe ihr im Namen der Kommission das Wort.
Thank you, Madam President, honourable members. Today, as we gather here, we reflect on the impact of the recent extreme weather events that have struck big parts of Europe, including Spain, Portugal, Italy, Malta, and Greece. First and foremost, on behalf of the European Commission, I extend my heartfelt condolences to the families and communities mourning the loss of loved ones, and I stand in solidarity with those who have seen their homes, their livelihoods and sense of security swept away in a matter of hours. From the very beginning, the Commission's Emergency Response Coordination Centre has been in close contact with civil protection authorities and the affected countries, exchanging information and ensuring support is promptly available if required. We improved our understanding of the situation thanks to our scientific partnership on natural hazards, and in parallel, Portugal, Italy and Spain proactively activated Copernicus to receive satellite images, enabling national authorities to better assess damage and guide their response efforts on the ground. The European Union, through the Union Civil Protection Mechanism, stands ready to assist with teams and equipment if requested by the affected member states. Beyond immediate emergency response, we must also consider the economic and social consequences. Support tools under the Common Agricultural Policy can be activated to assist farmers and forest holders who have suffered severe production losses or damage to their production potential. These measures are essential to protect rural livelihoods and food security. Honourable members, the Flood Directive is our key instrument for flood risk management. It requires that our member states map risks and develop plans to strengthen their prevention, protection and preparedness. These documents are reviewed regularly, but extreme weather events fueled by climate change are a reminder that we need to step up our game. Let's not forget that investing in preparedness always pays off, but both economically and in lives saved. And this is precisely why the Commission adopted the Preparedness Union strategy and the European Water Resilience strategy last year. These strategies underlined the importance of anticipation, readiness and resilience. By combining strong national capacities with effective European cooperation, we can better safeguard our citizens, ecosystems and economies against increasingly severe meteorological events. Contributions across preparedness, stockpiling, peer reviews, advisory missions and new legislation under the Union Civil Protection Mechanism are all central to this effort. At the heart of this approach lies one of our flagship principles, preparedness by design. This means embedding preparedness across all sectors, not treating crisis management as a standalone exercise limited to civil protection. Our policies, legislation and financial instruments must be crisis and disaster-proof by default. The Commission is committed to providing technical expertise and integrated solutions to help Member States address these growing challenges. As recovery efforts are already underway, the European Union again stands ready to support affected communities. The European Union Solidarity Fund was created to contribute to post-disaster relief in Member States and accession countries confronted with devastating natural disasters. It can cover part of public expenditure for essential emergency and recovery operations after major or regional natural disasters. The Commission strongly encourages and promotes better coordination and complementarity between the post-disaster emergency and recovery operations supported by the EU Solidarity Fund and more structural investments. And this includes using other EU funds, including cohesion policy funds, for investment aimed at mitigating climate change, as well as the European Social Fund and Erasmus Plus for training and skilling of the workforce and volunteering for preparedness and recovery. We stand ready to assess all options of support and assist the national and regional authorities in implementing these actions. As summer and droughts approach, together with the risk of wildfires, we are also working on this dimension. Our upcoming communication on integrated wildfire risk management will provide a strategic roadmap to address wildfires in the short and in the long term. And unfortunately, we know that these kind of tragic events in Spain, Portugal, Italy, Malta and Greece will not be the last of this magnitude. And the European Climate Risk Assessment of 2024 showed clearly that we are not sufficiently prepared. We must radically step up preparedness for climate impact. Therefore, the Commission is also preparing a European integrated framework for climate resilience, an agenda of support to build resilience by design. It will include a lean legislative proposal and supportive measures. People, companies and policymakers need better information about the climate realities that they are likely to face and how they can prepare for this impact. The integrated framework will support clarity on risk ownership, harness the knowledge on the ground and cater for flexibilities to account for particular circumstances of each EU member state. Honourable members, the success of these initiatives ultimately also depends on your support. Let us continue to foster solidarity, resilience and cooperation across our continent, ensuring we are best equipped to protect our people and environments against extreme weather challenges. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Frau Kommissarin.
Thank you, Commissioner. For the EPP, now Ms. Pereira, you have the floor.
Caros colegas,
Dear colleagues, let me start by expressing my sincerest condolences and solidarity for the families that have been hit by the storm that struck Portugal. I'd also like to wish a lot of courage to all of those that are rebuilding their houses, their businesses and their lives at the moment. This is perhaps the most difficult speech that I have given in this Parliament. In recent weeks, Portugal has been hit by unprecedented storms, unending rain and devastating floods. On the 28th of January in the morning, the central region was hit by winds of over 170 kilometres an hour. The damage extends for more than 30,000 kilometres squared, which is an area much bigger than Belgium. Around 6,000 kilometres of electrical network have been destroyed. And while I'm speaking here, there are thousands of people who are still without electricity. I come from this central region. My family's house in Coimbra has also been damaged. I know what it's like to try and find roof tiles and not find any. I know what it's like to feel the weaknesses, the fragility of what we take for granted. And it's quite right that people that have suffered are demanding more from the state. But what is not acceptable is turning this pain into political grandstanding. This is not the time for opportunism. It's a time for rebuilding. But we cannot rebuild like before. If we do that, we would be accepting the fact that the next storm could destroy everything again. Extreme events are no longer an exception, they are the new normal. And if the climate has changed, then also our political action needs to change. Prevention, adaptation of areas and infrastructures, and above all, European solidarity now have to be the new normal. Europe is leading in fighting climate change, but this leadership will only be real if it's felt on the ground in people's lives who are facing real losses at the moment. And that's what the Portuguese are expecting, and this is what Europeans deserve. Thank you very much.
Dankeschön für die.
Thank you. For the S&D, Mr. Clejour.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam President, colleagues. We're not confronted with climate phenomenon which are extreme. We're confronted by the effects of climate change. And throughout Europe, the first obligation is to provide help and assistance to the victims and to those who lost their goods. The European Solidarity Fund, as the Commissioner says, has proved insufficient given the extent of the damage. But the people on the ground, they need resources not just to face up to extreme climate events and the disaster. They have to rebuild and repair what they've lost. So we'll need a true regional reconstruction fund and not just a solidarity fund to face up to the emergency. Yes, we have to reinforce our capacities to face up to disasters and understand vulnerabilities, reorganize things better in Europe, and to have common European resources. But I'd like to underline two things. First of all, the social dimension. Identify vulnerable people in regions to support them and to face them if disaster strikes. Secondly, states should do their work to help local authorities that finance emergency services. The departments in France are in a difficult financial situation, and they can't invest in the technical means which allow them to face up to the catastrophes. Finally, we all have to speed up and the mobilization to fight climate change. Some say here that we have to invest less to reduce climate change and invest more to deal with the consequences. But 0.1 degrees more means tens of additional disasters, hundreds of thousands more people who will be victims. So that's enough. I look and the far right shouldn't prevent us from standing up to climate disasters and all these omnibuses in these commission which harm environmental policies. We should have to concentrate on the one goal: adapt and find against climate change. Thank you.
Dankeschön.
Thank you. For the PFE, we have Mr. Stancanelli.
Grazie, Presidente, signora.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, colleagues, Sicily was recently hit by a serious climate disaster starting on the 18th of January. Events of extraordinary intensity caused irreparable damage, having a huge impact on industries that are located where the event hit. Extraordinary measures are needed to provide economic support to those who have been affected. Without the right kind of support, many will not be able to proceed to rebuilding, and that will have serious consequences on local industry and productivity. In line with Articles 122 and 164 of the TFEU, it is absolutely crucial to move forward with activating the Solidarity Fund, providing all the support set out under that fund. And it's very important to look particularly at what has happened on the coasts to ensure that things can get up and running in an economically sustainable manner as soon as possible. And all of this has got to do with reconstructing those areas. I have presented a text along these lines to the Commission calling for this fund to be triggered. The Commission must take action now. The people of Sicily are anxiously awaiting the Commission's decision on whether to move forward with this support.
Thank you. For the ECR, we have Mr. Razza, please.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, colleagues, on behalf of the ECR Group, on behalf of the Brothers of Italy delegation, I wish now to express my deepest solidarity with all populations so hard hit by this climate emergency. As a Sicilian, I have experienced and continue to experience very difficult days because of how difficult the impact was of this extraordinary emergency, because of its impact on Sicily that has in particular struck the population of Nishemi that was hit with a landslide that has been discussed across Europe. Commissioner, I won't talk about access to the Solidarity Fund at this point, and I won't talk about the action that can be taken that's got to do with the beachside establishments. I won't talk about what's happening with the legal framework. I know that the European Commission will provide support in an economic sense, but in the next few days, the Italian government will be presenting a decree law to provide the right kind of support to the whole of the population. We should, however, be questioning ourselves. This is a question we should all be putting to ourselves. Last year, the European Commission put forward a proposal to the co-legislators, including the Parliament, to extend the Restore regulation throughout the whole of the financial cycle. But the co-legislators went against this. They said that that decision ought to be questioned. Or rather, that is a decision that ought to be questioned because I feel that a mistake was made.
Thank you. For Renew, Mr. Cothleen de Figueiredo, you have the floor. In recent years, recent weeks, there's been a succession of devastating, unprecedented storms in Portugal. 15 families have lost their nearest and dearest. Thousands of homes have been left without electricity, and the damage still needs to be counted. In memory of the suffering of these people, my government and the European Union has to do more, better and faster. The adaptation component has to be given more attention. And let me suggest that we have a European natural disaster plan, which has the ability to work on resilient electricity networks. We have to have a stronger civil protection mechanism in the European Union, protecting critical infrastructures, movable dams, pumping stations, and quick response instruments. We need less red tape, and so that hope and support can get to people in the days after catastrophes, not weeks after. We have to have social protection measures for those that have been moved from their homes. Today, so many people are suffering. That really is sad, but it would be even sadder if we repeat this because we have not done anything. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Reinke for the Greens.
Dear colleagues, our hearts go out to the people in Portugal, in Italy, in Spain, in Malta, and Greece. The devastating storms have destroyed livelihoods, roads, schools, railways. In Sicily, the ground collapsed in a landslide stretching over 4 kilometers. Looking at the footage again breaks my heart. But like so many other times before, I feel that our thoughts and prayers, colleagues, are simply not good enough anymore. We have to act. How many more tragedies does it take before we finally start taking this seriously? And I'm not only talking about rapid emergency aid and the Solidarity Fund, I'm talking about actually doing something about the situation with extreme weather events getting worse and worse and worse by the years. And where are our colleagues on the right, especially from the EPP, when it comes to changing something about this? And here in this parliament adopting legislation that is ambitious enough to stand up and having a good adaptation strategy for climate change. We must restore nature, colleagues, because nature is our strongest ally when it comes to extreme weather damage. Healthy soils, healthy forests, rivers that have space to rise over their banks without doing damage. This is what we need. And this is not a theoretical debate somewhere in Brussels. This is deciding about people's lives. We need to increase funding for disaster prevention and response. And we need a climate adaptation law, colleagues. Instead of shouting, "Don't look up," let us look at what is happening in Europe, at this continent, and let us do something about the situation. People in Europe deserve it. Thank you very much.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. For the left, Mr. Oliveira. Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Labib. My first words are condolences and solidarity for the victims and fatalities of these storms that we've seen in recent days in Portugal. There's been devastation, and even today, thousands of people are without electricity. Their lives have been devastated, not only by the storms, but the consequences of a response from the government that has taken too long. It's been uncoordinated and insufficient. The devastation caused by these storms in Portugal clearly shows the consequences of the wrong political choices that have privatized strategic responses and public services and have taken away the rapid response capability from the state. We need to help SMEs, farmers, and schools, farms, and we need to take measures to respond to the economic and social needs of the general public. We need support from the European Union, not just in terms of the mechanism that we're talking about here, but it's absolutely incomprehensible why the Portuguese government has not triggered some of the facilities that it could have. Thank you. Now we will hear from Mr. Jongen for the ESN.
Let's look at Berlin, first of all. Not extreme weather, a normal winter with a bit of frost and snow, and the city is in chaos because of the salting was forbidden by the red, green, black coalition, which led to they prevented salting, and the emergency services were overburdened with all the accidents. It was just days later the Senate allowed salting temporarily. The same climate emergency, which can't help a city in winter, and if we have the same policy in Europe, that doesn't look very good. The Commission wants to have solidarity for extreme weather. That sounds like a noble intention, and many disasters and many responses are excellent, but the EU's plans will lead to centralisation, in particular through civil-military cooperation and the new crisis coordination hub. We talk about Preparedness Union, but there's financing of 11 billion euros for a power structure up to 2034. That's 3 times as much as before. And the reasoning is, once again, climate change. But is there really a dramatic increase in disasters in South Europe? Studies in 2025 shows damage, but the long-term data doesn't give a clear picture of things getting worse, because a direct link with climate change is more unclear. Arson in Greece or Portugal with poor policies, with poor construction, are the causes. Solidarity and crisis help in emergencies, yes, but we don't need more bureaucracy which impinges on national competencies. Thank you.
That concludes the group speakers, and I'll be a bit stricter with the time now. I'll give the floor to Ms. Crispo-Diaz now.
Presidenta.
Commissioner, President, good morning. European countries once again have been hit by extreme weather against Portugal, Italy, Malta, Greece and Spain as well. Unfortunately, thinking back to that storm in Valencia, well, now you have Andalusia, Castilla y León that have been hit. There are people who have been evacuated from their homes and they're still waiting, and I wish to thank everyone who is working so hard to make sure that the impact is minimized. The town councils, the civil protection forces, and the regional government of Andalusia, which has been an example of coordination and has been there from the very beginning to try and help people in as humane a manner as possible. Over 8,000 people have been evacuated, main roads have been damaged, agricultural production has been affected, 10% of livestock has been affected, big exporting firms that are not able to go ahead with their work, massive impact on tourism across Andalusia. Andalusia is certainly in a situation where it's time to react to what it's facing. And it's not just by triggering the Solidarity Fund. It's not just about different types of European funds. It's also about thinking about a shift in policy, in a plan for hydrological stability. It's about moving away from turning everything into bickering about politics. It's about providing the right kind of support for infrastructure that will mean that there are fewer emergencies. This has to be done, and it has to come from Europe, with the right kind of laws and with the right kind of funding for infrastructure that's so necessary. A European plan for adaptation to climate change, as has already been mentioned this morning here, I think that that's an absolutely great idea, because RescEU must be used to make sure that there is a coordinated team for response. As storms tear through Spain, Portugal and other countries, we need to react to that, but we also need to adapt to what's coming in future. Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Mido. Please, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, today my first words go in memory of the victims of the extreme weather events that have hit the south of Europe and my country, Portugal. I'd also like to thank all of those for their work, those who have been involved in mitigating the effects of this disaster. Interrupted lives, people have been removed from their homes, businesses have been ruined, harvests are rotting, incalculable damage. And there's a new storm on the way as well, when there are more than 50,000 Portuguese people without electricity. That's the tragic situation. The Mediterranean basin and the Iberian Peninsula have become ground zero for the climate crisis in Europe. We've had devastating fires and catastrophic floods. And it's at times like these that the solidarity clause, the mutual support in times of crisis that lie at the heart of the European project and the treaties gain special significance. Portugal has activated Copernicus and the crisis reserve of the Common Agricultural Policy. The European Civil Protection Mechanism has not been used by the authorities, but the use of the Solidarity Fund and reprogramming funds are being analysed. We reject any political use of this tragedy. We want people in Portugal and other affected countries to know that Europe is with them, and this has to be seen in concrete action. For instance, we want the strategy and the action plan to prepare to respond to crisis should understand that national coordination is essential, whatever European mechanism is used as well. Thank you. Thank you. Next, Mr. Moreira de Sá, you have the floor. Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. These storms have shown an inconvenient truth. The Portuguese state fails every time it's put to the test. It's happened again now. People have been left without appropriate support. The European Union Solidarity Fund and other mechanisms can be used to directly or indirectly help in these situations. As the DEV shadow rapporteur on the civil protection mechanism, the EU has a a plethora of instruments to respond to catastrophes. We have the rescue funds, flexibility instruments for emergency situations. But at the same time, we need to say that the response has to be less bureaucratic and quicker. When people need immediate support, they cannot be held up by red tape or administrative calendars. We have to honour those who have lost everything. And we should not forget that states show their greatness in terms of how they care for people and how they rebuild hope and lives. Charles de Gaulle, who we owe a lot to here, said that a state that does not protect its citizens is not fulfilling its raison d'être. Thank you.
One by Mr. Oliveira and one by Mrs. Bosse. Do you accept? 1, 2? 2. Okay. 125, Michael, please.
Thank you very much. Mr. Moreira de Sá, you criticised the state, and my question is very direct. Do you agree or not that we should have public infrastructure companies because the response capability has been inadequate in energy, in telecommunications, in essential services? Do you not agree that the state needs to have a larger role in terms of civil construction as well? Because without state intervention, there cannot be a quick enough intervention from the state. Well, the quick and easy answer is I do not agree. I think it's the simplification in terms of public and private, what you're saying. But I do believe that what's become clear is the state has failed here. And that's where we need to act as politicians. That's what we need to prioritise. I don't think it's the private sector that is to blame here.
Thank you. Now, colleague Bosse, 33.
Thank you. And I really feel sorry for everything that has happened in your country. Now, your colleague or our colleague from ECN stated absolutely no facts in saying that this was not shown in data that climate is actually changing and that these severe weather events are going to increase. Is your party, is your group here in the Parliament also going to face up to that fact, or are you only going to talk about the need for money, the need for solidarity between us when the events happen? Are you going to face up to reality?
Thank you very much. In my specific case, as I've said a number of times here, I think one thing is adapting to climate change, and we don't disagree to that. But the issue is the policies that we adopt to deal with this and the economic reality of different countries. And in my personal case, we do not diverge here in terms of evaluating the problem. It's more on the policy measures to solve the problem that we have a difference of opinion on. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Solier, you have the floor.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Today we're talking about European solidarity with extreme weather events in Portugal, Spain, Italy, Malta, Greece. Europe needs to respond, but it should ask for responses. In Valencia, a year later, people are still worried when it rains, and there are no clear emergency plans. There's no effective communication to the general public, and people are still vulnerable. Solidarity should not just be a photo opportunity. It needs to be preparation, coordination, and response. And aid needs to get to those who need it without bureaucracy and without delay. That's why I have a direct question today. What about the European cohesion funds? Who is checking that they get to the affected people and they're not caught up in red tape? We need total transparency, public audits about where money is going. Because if Europe is financing the response, it should be able to prove the results as well, with total traceability and no families left behind. Thank you.
Well, we're having a technical problem here because this list is not the same as the list that we have here, and so we stick to Mr. Gerbrandi now as next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll try to speak Irish. No, without joking, Madam Commissioner, dear colleagues, I actually wanted to say this in Dutch. Als je door het Nederlandse Zeeland rijdt.
If you go through the Netherlands, you could think you're in Scandinavia. There are beautiful wooden houses, and as a demonstration of European solidarity, dating back to 1953, after the floods in that year, there was 1,800 people who died, and we got solidarity from the Scandinavian countries. And those affected by these disasters in southern Europe, I would like to see European solidarity for them. It's important, but we shouldn't have help after the event. We should try to prevent these disasters. We must increase our resilience through a reasonable climate policy, and we'll be voting on this today. I'm saying that to this side of the House, but we must start to have true European deltas. We must protect ourselves against approaching climate change. Mr. Marino, the next speaker.
In Sicilia il mare ha raggiunto onde di 16 metri.
In Sicily, waves reached a height of 16 meters, not in the Caribbean, but in the heart of the Mediterranean. Cyclone Harry struck Italy in a way that had never happened before. Climate change has already profoundly shifted the balances of our continent and indeed our planet. And the territory was left exposed, fragile, without prevention and without a strategy, without a project. Scientific data are alarming. But there was a lack of infrastructure, a lack of a long-term strategy. And citizens, families, local communities are paying the price today for that. In the Mediterranean, extreme weather events have become a matter of course. And Europe must respond swiftly, activating the Solidarity Fund and enabling the reuse of cohesion funds, not just to rebuild, but to prevent. Because if you rebuild without preventing, that means you're just laying the groundwork for the next disaster to happen. From a scientific standpoint, we need to think carefully about the data here, because if you don't take action in the right way, well, it makes no sense.
Thank you. The next speaker, Ms. Martins.
Obrigada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Storms are natural, but responsibility is human. The Portuguese Prime Minister has said that victims who did not avoid the tragic consequences of dying, the Portuguese government has not activated European solidarity mechanisms and is not taking seriously the warnings. 15 people have died in Portugal. Thousands have been left without power, communications. Houses have been left without roofs. They've been flooded. But a majority of irresponsible people are rejecting environmental compromises and commitments. With storms, the poorest lose their houses, their jobs, everything. And they don't have any lobbyists here. Commissioner, I urge you that let Europe be up to this feeling of more solidarity. We need to do more and we need to do it better.
Thank you. So I'll close the Catch the Eye procedure. We have so many speakers. The next speaker, Ms. Zakaria.
Κυρίες και κύριοι συνάδελφοι.
Ladies and gentlemen, climate change is no longer in the future. It is here. It is affecting our everyday lives. It is the response of nature to your false policies. In Greece, whenever we have rainfall or snow, what they tell us is to stay at home. Everything stops, the schools close, everything. And when we have forest fires, they tell us to leave our homes and start running. Is this what happens in other countries? I ask you. Is this a response to climate crisis, or is it a proof that critical infrastructure has been left to rot? Who in the EU actually checks that the member states do what they're supposed to do when we're talking about prevention? Where are those? Where is this infrastructure? We need real funding, not just trying to face the crisis after the fact. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Falcone.
Falcone, sorry.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, in the plenary today, we are talking about Cyclone Harry and the other extreme weather events that have hit Portugal, Malta, Greece. And we can see the impact of those events with our own two eyes. But turning now to Italy, to Sardinia, to Calabria, to Sicily, there are many communities, particularly coastal communities, facing incalculable damage to infrastructure, to communications, to their productivity, to their homes. And if you look at the case of Niscemi in Sicily, you see that there has been a huge landslide that has led to hundreds of thousands being evacuated and that has imperiled the very existence of that town. Italy, rather Europe, must act swiftly to counter the effects of climate change. That is why we have called for the activation of the Solidarity Fund of the European Union. But further to this, we have also talked about reactivating the Restore regulation. At the same time, to ensure that reconstruction happens in the best way possible at all, we must turn to the legal and political nature of how we go ahead with this. We must act in a balanced manner. The Baltenstein Directive must be implemented in the territories affected. We must work to ensure that competitiveness is possible, and we must make sure, too, that businesses have what they need to try and rebuild and to make sure that we have employment, particularly when it comes to the tourism industry of the south of Italy. We're not calling for permanent derogations here. We're talking about common sense that takes into account the reality on the ground.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Luena.
Bugs that we have in the list at the moment.
No hay problema, Presidenta.
No problem, Chair. Unfortunately, phenomena like the floods in southern Europe we've seen recently are going to be seen more often because they're a consequence of climate change throughout the whole of south of Europe. In Spain, Spain is suffering, although it might have been removed from the title here, but particularly in Andalusia, they are phenomenon caused by global warming and by greenhouse gas emissions rising. But paradoxically, the entire far right and the EPP will be voting against the climate package in a couple of hours. This is negationism. But they have a clear political responsibility. Let me say it straight. Our targets are clear. We need to reduce emissions and not delay the end of internal combustion engines as well. We need more solidarity too. Commissioner, a European insurance fund to protect people, farmers and regions that have been affected. And we need a European water resilience fund. We need to reduce emissions, we need adaptation plans, and an insurance fund and determination against the negationism of the far right and the right unfortunately, the Spanish EPP in particular.
Next.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Sanchez.
Madame la Présidente, mes chers collègues, l'Union européenne.
President, colleagues, the EU finds hundreds of millions to spend on things that are not priorities for Union citizens. But the EU is incapable when it comes to issues where the population really needs us, including preventing natural disasters. We constantly hear about EU solidarity, and we need to be bold enough to say that EU aid, when it comes to these disasters, is simply not up to the job. Over a year after Cyclone Chido, well, the situation is still apocalyptic. Are the citizens of France's outermost territories lesser citizens in the eyes of the EU? What is the EU doing about this, apart from talking about the green transition? What specific aid is it providing to victims, apart from a few miserly funds? We must be providing support to our farmers, to our wine producers. What are we doing to prevent storm surges? What are we doing to provide support to local officials who are fighting to try and move along with plans to help the population? The EU is a failure on this. In fact, it's nowhere to be seen.
Blue cards. No. Okay. Next, readiness.
The next speaker is Mr. Neski.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. I'm taking the floor today to draw this House's attention to a situation that calls directly on the responsibility of the EU. Calabria, Sicily and Sardinia have recently been hit by extreme weather events that have caused huge damage to strategic infrastructure in areas where the social fabric is already particularly fragile. This is not just about providing ad hoc support, it's about continuous support. These are not just numbers. Behind every road that's been cut off, behind every isolated community, you have people who simply have no perspective of a future. I want to focus now on Calabria, a region that has responded with a sense of responsibility and dignity, but ought not to be left to its own devices. The citizens of Calabria must not suffer the inertia of the EU institutions. We must not be resigned in the face of this. The EU must provide specific and targeted support and assistance on the ground. Today, Calabria has turned its eyes to Brussels. It is up to us. It's our moral and political duty to show that their trust has been correctly placed.
A blue card. There is a card. Excuse me. There is a blue card by colleague Guarda. Yes, please. 731.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. It goes without saying, colleague, that these extreme weather events do not happen out of a matter of destiny or fate, and so we must show solidarity. But at the same time, you could admit that there is a problem. This poor weather, you call this bad weather or poor weather, is the result of climate change, which is rooted in science and which calls for structural policy action from the institutions. But you ignore that scientific consensus. Your government, what will they be doing? They were the ones responsible to monitor and prevent what was happening in Sicily. Your government, your minister is in charge of that.
Please, colleagues, you have to stick to your time. We have so many catch the eyes and blue cards.
Io penso che
Well, in my view, when you are facing, as your colleague was saying, by the way, I think from your same group, as your colleague was saying, you're facing waves of 10, 12, 16 meters. Well, that doesn't fall just to one single minister or government. That government took action immediately, and indeed not right now, but they've been laying the groundwork for some time on how to tackle these issues. In my view, this inertia that I mentioned is linked to what was done or not done in the previous term. If you feel that humans are the problem, you're wrong. We do not share that view. We do not think that humans and agriculture are the problem. They are at the heart of our productive system. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Allion. Madam President, Commissioner, colleagues. In recent days, Southern Europe has seen dramatic events, and they're recurrent. I'm thinking about the victims, but I'd like to, my thoughts go to the volunteer firefighter who died. We have extreme weather events. They're not atypical. We speak about this every sitting, the Iberian Peninsula and overseas departments. It's a result of climate change. It's our citizens who pay the heavy price. Thousands of people evacuated, no electricity, they can't work, study or move around. Tomorrow, there will be hundreds of millions of euros in repairs and higher insurance premium and uninsurable homes. We can't have inaction or lack of preparation. We have to consolidate our alert systems as trained citizens, have a risk system, and preparation should be a reality for our citizens. But this preparation must be efficient and must protect our voluntary firefighters, civil protection forces, and emergency response. Madam Commissioner, the civil protection mechanism is required to make things possible for volunteer firefighters.
My colleague Bosse, dear colleague Aliona, there is a blue card by colleague Bosse, but this will be the last one then, 2 per person. I can't accept more.
Thank you, Gregory, for accepting this. From time to time, we here in the Parliament have people who don't really respect science and numbers from the insurance industry. But we know that you, as a firefighter, you have been on the ground, you have seen this change. Can you just tell us in few words what has happened during the last 10, 20 years regarding forest fires and extreme events?
Merci.
Thank you, colleague. As you said, I'm a volunteer firefighter. I'm on the spot, on the ground every time for about 35 years now. I've seen the difference and the recurrence and intensity of events. All those who are absent, and there are things to be done, but questioning the evidence, there's no coherence and perhaps a show of naiveness on the ground. And when it comes to taking action, you need to be at our side from time to time.
No, there is a rule that there are no blue cards for the same group. I'm sorry, we didn't realize that in time, so please do not put blue cards for speakers of the same group. Thank you, and you can have your discussion outside, please, because we will continue with colleague Tegetov. Please have your discussion outside.
One and a half years ago, extreme floods in southern Europe, in Spain, killed hundreds of people. Last week, storms of similar intensity hit again, this time especially Portugal. None of this is simply bad luck. These floods were a predictable possibility of a raging climate. In Portugal, we saw how quickly floods can overwhelm infrastructure, cutting roads, power, and access to basic services. This is not a series of isolated disasters. This is the new normal of a climate emergency that Europe is still not prepared for. We need a real European plan to protect us from what's still to come, for our towns, for our infrastructure, for our society. And for this, we also need a dedicated European budget for climate adaptation. When a flood hits, you only have a few seconds to save your life. Europe must be ready before the next one strikes.
Thank you. There's a blue card from colleague Grappini.
542, please.
Mulțumesc, doamna președintă.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be speaking Romanian. Is that okay if I speak Romanian? So, dear colleague, you expressed your opinion on current events because we've seen this in almost every member state, including my own, Romania. But after what the Commission mentioned, the funds, emergency aid, don't you think we have a budget for prevention? Because this, what we're doing now is only correcting after the fact. But we have cases where citizens' houses are not reconstructed, infrastructure is not repaired. Don't you think we should spend money on prevention? Thank you.
This is exactly what I am talking about. We need to have the structure to actually have our whole budget, the whole way we do European politics, like going forward to a direction that is ready to tackle those problems. But this is not the case, and many of our policies are acting against our own values and those needs to adapt to climate change. And I think we really need to be aware of this and make sure that we act accordingly.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Antocci.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. From the 19th to the 21st of January, Sicily, Sardinia and Calabria were hit by Cyclone Harry. Huge damage that's still being assessed, huge numbers behind which you see tourism, work, families, businesses risking being left to their own devices. Just look at Nishemi, this community hit by a landslide, which is still in movement. Nighttime evacuations, children, women, men, all of them left outside of their homes. So I would call on the Commission to activate immediately the Solidarity Fund. We need to act swiftly in an agile manner to protect the life and dignity of the people affected, because this is a matter of dignity. Yesterday someone said to me that they wanted to move through pain swiftly before it set in a suffering. We must tackle climate change in order for this to happen. If not, we are simply sawing off the branch on which we are sitting, and in particular where future generations will be sitting as well. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Nicolaou Alavanos.
We've seen great tragedy in many countries, but also in our country, Greece. Throughout the country, we've seen the criminal strategy of cost effectiveness of the EU and our governments laid bare. They don't implement necessary civil protection projects because they're not profitable for developers and companies, whereas civil protection falls under military preparedness. Furthermore, when the government removed certain flood mitigation projects from the RRF, the European Commission agreed, saying that things changed. And a few months later, we had new victims. They want to make people believe and accept the fact that they will drown in the winter and burn in the summer. But we cannot come to terms with this EU policy that sacrifices people's lives and livelihoods for profit. People need to fight for real civil protection projects, real compensation for damages, because they want to lead the victims to...
Thank you. The next speaker.
Thank you, Chair, dear colleagues. The Mediterranean is a hotspot of the climate crisis. These extreme phenomena will keep repeating themselves, as we see in Greece. So we need to be prepared to do more on critical infrastructure, on civil protection mechanisms, as well as the RESC-EU cooperation mechanism. We need to be able to rebuild faster through the Solidarity Fund. The crisis does not only manifest itself through floods or fires. We have heat waves, lack of water, and that means that the farmers cannot work. We need to be by their side so that they will be able to have a response to conditions that are not of their own making. We need to have a new approach: cooperation, protection. These are the key words for our societies to be in a better position and our citizens to feel safer. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Mr. Lupo.
Grazie, signora Presidente.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, colleagues, Cyclone Harry hit Sicily, Sardinia and Calabria. causing massive damage to some of the most fragile communities in the European Union. Our solidarity goes out to them. Many kilometres of coasts were devastated. There was a landslide placing homes and economic activities at risk. Many people have lost their homes. The Italian government must take action, and the EU too must be at the side of those communities that have been hit, helping them to rebuild and helping to lay a foundation for prevention. I would thank Commissioner Labib for her words. The institutions must work together to activate the European Solidarity Fund, as well as the other instruments that are available. We must extend the Restore regulation to provide support to citizens, to economic activities, and we must look at the Bolkestein Directive to provide a future for those communities that have been affected. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Member Streit, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Commissioner, colleagues. I come from the Eifel in Rhineland, Westphalia, and we had a major flood some years ago. We had floods in 2016 and 2018 too. We extended our disaster support, and we have a disaster centre. It's important that the local authorities have enough money so that the plans that they have can be implemented so that they're properly prepared. The European awareness system in 2021 gave us a warning, but this warning didn't reach everybody in the Rhineland-Palatinate. We had this system in place and we warned. We evacuated camping sites. We had one unfortunate death, and the next time it was 135 dead. We see that we're not protected against natural disasters, but we can have better preparation. So networking throughout European early warning systems and local authorities is the most important goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Maria Ohisalo, you have the floor.
Chair, Commission, first of all, my condolences to all affected. As the climate crisis intensifies, extreme weather events are becoming a norm, not an exception. Droughts, wildfires, heat, flooding. While the financial cost is high, the human cost is staggering, and no one is safe here. We cannot escape these effects in the European workplaces either. Intense conditions cause accidents, illness, and loss of productivity, loss of lives. Work-related accidents and illnesses already cost 475 billion euros a year, and growing share of it is due to extreme weather. Commission, if you really want to live up to the idea of solidarity, the European Union must start protecting all workers equally from extreme weather conditions. And it is high time to propose legislation against this escalating threat.
Now, Ms. Salas, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. Extreme weather events that have hit the south of Italy are not isolated. They are a clear sign of the systemic crisis hitting Calabria, Sicily, Sardinia. They show that the climate crisis and social inequalities are overlapping. Cyclones, floods, fires are hitting fragile infrastructures and the general public. The climate crisis is worsening the southern question, which Antonio Gramsci spoke about a century ago. Our responses can't just be emergency ones. We need to have structural investments, and local communities have to be involved. In addition to major works or bridges over the straits, we need services that are really useful for normal people. Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Casa.
Thank you, President. Colleagues. Storm Harry ravaged infrastructure, property, and many livelihoods. Citizens in affected countries are currently facing its consequences. In Malta, the damage was severe. Families suffered. Small businesses suffered. Farmers and fishermen lost their means of income. We cannot ignore this. My appeal is to mobilize solidarity instruments to help citizens in affected countries. I would also like to appeal to the Commission, and especially this Commissioner, for a broad interpretation of the relevant criteria so that Malta is able to benefit from this fund. These criteria, unfortunately, place small member states at a big disadvantage, and this is unfair. For this reason, we should also evaluate the instruments at our disposal and see whether they are tailored to today's reality, a reality where storms are becoming much more frequent and much more ferocious. My appeal is for more funding, for more efficient procedures, for less demanding thresholds, and for special measures for the most isolated islands and regions facing particular challenges. Let us work together towards a fact-based solidarity. Let us walk the walk, not only in the wake of Storm Harry, but also to be better prepared for future events. Thank you very much.
Casa, do you accept colleague Casa? Do you accept the blue card by colleague Maestri? 623, please.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Kaza, I do share lots of your concerns, but we're seeing how many in this House are still denying climate change. We're asking for help for infrastructures to deal with the damage and for agricultural areas. But on the right wing, there doesn't seem to be many people asking for this. What's your opinion? You're part of the EPP. And the far right in my country, with Vox, they're saying a lot of things against climate change. And they're not here asking for help for agricultural areas. What can you do to convince your colleagues and to convince those on the right wing to see that this negationism does have devastating costs in areas in the south of Europe?
Thank you. We need to take measures in the wake of climate change without, however, putting too much pressure on pensioners, on workers, on the elderly, on vulnerable people. We need to make adequate measures in this regard. In fact, I'm honored that alongside another EPP member, Esther de Lange, we were responsible for the Social Climate Fund. The idea is for climate measures not to adversely affect people who are unable to keep up with others. So, yes, we are in favor of such measures which do not put disadvantaged people at a further disadvantage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Aguirre-Saliba, you have the floor.
Malta is the exact same as other member states, and we deserve the same help. After this storm which affected fishermen, farmers, private houses, businesses, beaches, and public infrastructure. So how can we talk about European solidarity when the Solidarity Fund mechanism does not allow small member states like Malta to receive help from these funds? How can we accept this? How could we accept that Sicily, a country that was also ravaged by Storm Harry, receives funding, but Malta cannot receive the same funding? We have no help. This is blatant discrimination, and we must address this as soon as possible by more flexibility. Maltese people and people from Gozo are on the same level as Italians, as the Portuguese, as the Spanish. The European Union must really get to grips with this issue if it really calls itself a union of solidarity. We also need more funding to help places like Marsa Scala or Arlapsi, a bay in Malta. They were ravaged by this storm. And for this reason, we need modernized infrastructure. Instead of funding wars and proliferating weapons, we need to invest in our people, our citizens, and these important needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cohen, you have the floor.
Thank you. Members, extreme weather events are no longer exceptional. They're becoming more frequent, more severe, and more disruptive right across Europe. When these events expose clear infrastructural weaknesses, particularly in flood defences, we must act decisively. Flood protection, like housing and energy infrastructure, should never be trapped for years in planning paralysis or serial judicial reviews, as is too often currently the case. A more realistic balance must be struck. Environmental protections, of course, matter, but so too do people's homes, businesses and livelihoods. Rectifying gaps and weaknesses is in the common good. As such, flood relief schemes and critical adaptation works must be delivered faster, including through wider use of streamlined planning and permitting procedures like the Part 8 process at home in Ireland. European solidarity also matters, and I want to echo my colleague Barry Andrews in calling for Ireland to apply swiftly to the EU Solidarity Fund following Storm Chandra. But as I said, ultimately preparedness starts at home. If extreme weather is now the new norm, then political resolve, better planning and faster delivery must be our new norm. Thankfully, this appears clearly understood by our own Taoiseach and government, and I expect it will lead our decision-making in this area in the weeks, months and indeed years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So, colleague Preparedness, you have the floor.
Spoštovani, pred 3 leti so Slovenijo prizadele najhujše poplave v njeni zgodovini. Posledice je bilo čutiti v kar 2/3 naše države.
The severe floods are the worst in our history. The damage is going to cost more than 10 billion. A third of the country has been devastated. This is a climate catastrophe. The EU has reacted and done so successfully, but insufficiently. Extreme weather conditions are a new reality, and our aid is still too decentralized. In addition to health protection and disaster mechanisms, we need coordination for a successful disaster management system. We need resilience with climate protection and disaster protection that is available to everyone, which is why we need a strong European framework which makes it possible to react quickly and to help quickly. Next, Mr. Avonitis.
Dear colleagues, this climate change is the result of certain policies and unbridled capitalism. Let's call a spade. And extreme weather conditions show how inadequate the EU is in terms of preventing but also restoring climate resilience. This is what we saw with the RRF. In Greece, for example, the right-wing government of Mitsotakis is just an irresponsible observer of climate and financial catastrophe that takes place throughout Greece. So we need to see what we need in order to also be useful here. We need a permanent mechanism of efficient and timely assistance. We need to reinforce the common agricultural policy with climate reserve to immediately compensate producers for their losses. We need to upgrade RESC-EU with new firefighting planes, high-capacity pumps, and mobile hospital units, among others.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cunha, you have the floor. Portugal has been the victim of an extreme weather event, a very rare one, but it has left a trail of destruction in its wake. It has affected families, companies, public infrastructures, and private ones to boot. And I'd like to take this opportunity to express my solidarity to those affected, to the families of the victims, of people who have died, and to those who have suffered and are still suffering in these circumstances today. I'd also like to thank civil society for its support and the public and private institutions who have done the same. Firemen, the police force, the army, and all of those who have contributed to minimising the effects of what has happened in Portugal. The government of the Portuguese Republic, local authorities and institutions on the ground have worked together to try and overcome the problem. We need to keep working to avoid repetition of these events. We need to mitigate climate change. That needs to be part of our agenda. But we need to prioritise adaptation, reaction, and repairs. Adaptation to prepare the general public for these situations, reaction so that we can react quickly, and repairs so that we can give people the living conditions they need. But countries can't do this on their own. That's why European intervention is absolutely crucial so that we can resolve the situation. Thank you.
Dankeschön.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Anatoglou.
Dear colleagues, once again we're talking about the readiness of European mechanisms after the catastrophe has already taken place in the south of Europe. So apparently this is the weakest link. I'm talking about prevention. We are talking a lot about prevention, and it should be our main focus. We cannot run after the fact. We need to have preventive planning at the European level. Concretely, we need to map the places that are more vulnerable to climate change, and we need technical support and connection of EU funding with preventive measures. Local and regional authorities are on the front line against these extreme weather phenomena, but often they do not have the tools they need at their disposal. European citizens are expecting some great strides towards climate infrastructure with European solidarity in practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Maluli, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, the citizens of Europe have been hit unexpectedly on far too many times by extreme weather conditions. We all remember the terrible floods that struck Valencia back in 2024. And again this week, we see Spain and Portugal hit by a third deadly storm in only 2 weeks. Our thoughts go out to those affected in these countries, and indeed in my own constituency, the people of County Louth and County Meath, sitting at home watching the water levels grow to record levels and waiting for an alarm to go off. Commissioner, we've been here before, and we know the weaknesses. Just over a year ago, when Storm Eowyn hit my country, we know the weaknesses, the failure to react to information. It's not rocket science, Commissioner. You know this. The 4 key issues we need to double our efforts on. Number 1, we must gather accurate meteorological information. That is key to the situation. But number 2, we must share it with our national and local authorities urgently. And 3, urgently and efficiently, we must trigger the mechanism for an action plan when it is required. And number 4, we must communicate with our people around the world and around the European continent of Europe. It's not rocket science. We all have these gadgets in our pocket. We can communicate by text. Why are we not doing it? To fail to plan is to plan to fail, Commissioner.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Schilling.
Colleagues, I'd like to ask you something. How many debates about disaster preparedness will we have whilst the climate crisis is escalating? This year in southern Europe, the year started with environmental disaster, and which was fateful. These are pictures that we've seen throughout Europe. These are debates that we've had on many times. Nonetheless, we're here again and discussing the events again. The next flood, the next disaster will come very soon. We need to discuss that. We need preparedness, we need money, we need the resources, and we need plans. Thank you for that. But we need something else, and that is courage. Courage to deal with these causes, and not just to try to throw money at the problem. It's about human lives, about families who lose their homes to floods and fires. We forget that sometimes when we're here. We forget sometimes that we're talking about the reality of people every day. It's cynical to say here and to talk about how we can have preparedness when 3 days later we want to postpone things. These aren't fateful things. They're the consequence of decisions, and we're all responsible for that.
Card des Kollegen Sieper.
Will you accept a blue card from colleague Sieper?
841.
Vielen Dank, Frau
Thank you, colleague. It's a question of a generational question, all this. If you look at our generation, you have the feeling that the understanding for the victims of the climate crisis is somewhat bigger. What do you think, colleague, how, when it comes to more experienced politicians and colleagues, how can we make them aware of the necessity of greater climate protection? Thank you for that question. I think at the end of the day, we just need empathy. If we understand that we're talking about the realities of our children, about the very basis of life that we're leaving to our children, if we talk about that, we're talking about something very specific, material. What we're doing with this world, what we can tell our children, it's quite clear what we have to do. And all children's books that we read to our children says that we need to respect nature. And when it comes to our children, we need to respect that.
Vielen Dank. Und nun erhält das Wort die Kollegin Serra.
Now, Mercedes Sanchez. Thank you, Chair. We're living in dystopian times. There are more and more people afraid of dying in natural disasters more than of old age. We've got so much scientific knowledge, but elites are denying the problem. We've got extreme summers in Spain. We've got historic droughts, floods between 1993 and 2023. 27,000 people died, and worse is yet to come. Capitalism has collapsed while the far right is on the rise, and it's denying climate policies. You're stealing oil, natural resources, erecting wars and carrying out genocide. But there will be no refuges for rich people, because the only thing that you're destroying is the only thing that can save us all. I think that my children and new generations want to live in a world where people die from old age, not from natural disasters. It's not much to ask. That's the bare minimum, but it's incompatible with the avarice of these elites. Thank you very much.
Dank. Jetzt spricht nun die Kollegin.
Now, Ms. Chinichi, you have the floor.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, I wish to begin by expressing my solidarity with the communities hit by extreme weather events across various member states. Huge damage has been caused and there have been casualties. The south of Italy has been very harshly affected as well due to Cyclone Harry, hitting Sicily, Sardinia and Calabria. And then you have the community of Niscemi in Sicily, which has been hit with a landslide. All of this is plain for us to see. Entire neighborhoods destroyed, houses collapsed, people on their knees, families with no shelter, people forced to leave their homes with no idea whether they'll ever be able to go back. The European Union must take action, and now. Every instrument possible must be activated to support families and businesses, making use of the Solidarity Fund and indeed implementing every action to help rebuild and guarantee that things can get up and running again. We are facing the risk of a job and economic desert with a potential hugely negative impact on the local social and economic fabric. Solidarity, real European solidarity, is about not leaving our territories alone in their darkest hour, and now is one of those times. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Dear colleague Ginici, there is a blue card by Mr. Tegethoff.
Thank you for accepting my blue card. Many of your colleagues, and you do so as well, talk a lot about the Solidarity Fund and about the reaction to those emergencies now. And of course, I agree, we need to react to those emergencies and help the people on the ground. But you're not talking at all about a strategy of how we can adapt for the future. We cannot just, in even more severe situations, and those disasters getting more and more severe by the hour, by the day, by the month, by the year. So how do we react? What is your strategy? This is not a strategy.
I'm sorry, I didn't have the translation. I don't know. No. I think I hope to understood very well what you said. Se io ho capito bene, parlo in italiano.
I'll reply in Italian. If I understand correctly, you asked about the strategy to tackle and prevent these types of phenomena. You're absolutely right. Of course, action must be taken at the preventive stage. It's not just about providing support after the fact to communities that have been affected. We must all work together. On these issues, we all must pull together. And those of us who hold political office hold the greatest responsibility to work together to try and prevent the dramatic events like those that have just occurred. When it comes to extreme weather events, well, these are things that happen, and they are happening more frequently. And so working together on prevention is, of course, something that is crucial. Thank you for your question.
Dankeschön.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Gallan, you have the floor.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, President. In order for the far right to govern, it is calling on the PP in Spain to do away with climate change. And this is happening while in my country and across Europe, millions of people are suffering the effects of storms. 8 in this year alone, with floods and other terrible consequences. These are not one-off events. Think back to the high temperatures that multiplied forest fires last summer. Experts are clear on this. This is climate change. And we need to guarantee security to those affected. Security. That is a word that's being used by the far right as a slogan. But in their fanaticism, they are condemning us to a profound insecurity. Because as risks are on the rise, they're calling for the rollback of climate policy. And we all know where that irresponsibility will lead. They were celebrating the elimination of the emergency protection unit in Valencia, just months before over 200 people died in the storm there. Their negationism is an attack on the security of our people, so we will not agree to moving back on our environmental policy.
There is a blue card by Mr. Sieper. Yes. 841.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much, colleague, for accepting the blue card. I think it's all right if I put my question in German. Great. Before I put my question, I'd like to make it clear that, like you, that I think that the far right is incorrectly denying climate change, and that is one of the main reasons why we're here. But I'd like to ask you if you think that linking climate change policies with left-wing policies has helped things, because I think that the more parts of the conservative camp have been lost. Shouldn't we think of this in abstraction of the political aspects?
Gracias por su pregunta. Las políticas climáticas no son...
Thank you for your question. Climate policy is not a matter of the left or the right. This is necessary, urgent policy, and we must all take action on this. But the far right calls us climate fanatics. They accuse us of going against the interests of our farmers and our businesses, when it's quite the contrary. They are the ones leaving people unprotected. They're the ones working against public institutions. Those of us who believe and who know that there's no other planet, that we have to take care of the one that we have, well, we all have to work together. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear from Ms. Pedro. First of all, condolences to the victims and solidarity to the families and those who've had their lives affected. People have their houses flooded, no power, no communications, harvests have been lost, companies are paralysed, but the country has responded. Soldiers, forces of law and order, firemen and women, volunteers have helped, and financial support has been quick to get to those who've lost everything. But when tragedies exceed our capabilities and resources, no national response is enough on its own. This is the time where the European Union, I think, really does make sense. I want to underscore the role of the Portuguese armed forces, men and women who have got to people who are isolated. They've guaranteed access where everything has fallen apart, and they've provided responses where there is desperation. They didn't ask if it was easy, they just asked where they needed to be. Commissioner, these extreme phenomena are not exceptional. They've become part of our permanent risk framework. We need resilient infrastructures, and we need effective alert systems. We need, above all, protection, civil protection as a key pillar of governance in the future, which is no longer exceptional.
There is a blue card by colleague Oliveira. Do you accept it? Please, 125.
Thank you, Chair. First off, why has the Portuguese government used all of the mechanisms of the European Union to provide a response to the consequences of the storms in Portugal? Why has the Portuguese government not used the civil protection mechanism, the emergency reserves and the solidarity funds? Countries like Germany, France and Italy have used these whenever needed. And secondly, how can you justify the CDS party in Germany preventing there being a debate that we're having here today? Don't you think there should be a democratic debate on the late response from the government? I think the first part, you're wrong there. The government has responded. The government has mobilised resources and people on the civil protection mechanism. Generators have been sent. But on the Solidarity Fund, the government was asking for access, and the damage is still being counted now. This government is using technical facts, not just the noise that's out there and all the media storm. Now onto the Catch the Eye procedure, and our colleague Steve has the floor.
Hvala predsjednice. Prvo bih želio naravno izraziti solidarnost sa obiteljima stradalih od ovih.
Thank you.
Govorim dolazeći iz Hrvatske koja je 2020. imala 2 potresa u Zagrebu i Petrinji i osjetila je vašu europsku solidarnost aktiviranjem.
We've seen the effects of European
20, and we could benefit from a European solidarity. Also, I do think that today we have to say that together we should take care of the environment, but we should also do it on the basis of science and reasoning. and have good logic. We should not prevent, for dogmatic and ideological reasons, to put salt on the roads in order to prevent ice creating there. This is not good. Anyway, we have to invest more in preparedness, and I think we should welcome the proposal of the Commission.
Seat 384, please.
Grazie, President. Thank you, Chair. 2 days of storm can bring an airport to a standstill, close a harbour, and leave families without access to food, medicine, and essential everyday services. Just imagine what happens if this becomes the new normal. Climate change is knocking at our door. And if we don't want it to bust our door open, then the European response must be proactive and not just reactive. We must strengthen and invest in a framework for climate resilience so that we can be prepared for the increasingly severe impact of climate change, especially on islands. At the same time, we require tools that work when the situation escalates, including solidarity mechanisms that work for everyone. For example, dear Commissioner, was the European Solidarity Fund accessible to Malta when it was seriously hit by Storm Harry? The answer is no. And I hope that you are listening carefully and that action will be taken. Will we keep on going like this, or we let people pay a harsh price?
Sure that we can take so many catch the eye as possible. Please stick to your speaking time. And the next speaker is Mr. Sebastian Tynkkynen, seat 210, please.
Arvoisa Madam President, from one plenary session to the next, this House sings the same tune. When extreme weather events occur, the response is always to expand the EU's powers, create a new super authority, and increase the amount of shared funds. This is the wrong way to go. It's like trying to manage a local storm centrally from Brussels. But you, dear decision makers, are not all powerful. Extreme weather events cost tens of billions of euros annually in the EU, and, funnily enough, now there is talk of solidarity mechanisms. These situations are indeed serious, but they are entirely a matter for national preparedness and decision-making. In this chamber, solidarity seems to be synonymous with a permanent transfer of power or outsourcing of responsibility. My position remains the same. No new EU agencies and, in particular, no EU money to fix weather phenomena.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mr. Suido Alvarez, seat 759, please.
Muchas gracias, Presidente. Thank you, Madam Chair. In recent days, in Andalusia, where I'm from, we're seeing tragic situations due to the weather events. We've seen people having their houses flooded. In one of the rivers in Andalusia, the Guadalquivir, we've seen it break its banks in Seville. Thousands of hectares of crops have been wiped out, and the damage has still not been properly evaluated. And we've had hundreds of kilometres of infrastructures that have been destroyed, which still need to be appraised as well. People are trying to save lives, but we have resisted. Fortunately, there have not been more losses because of how the Andalusian government has coordinated things with all of the security forces, police forces, and volunteers.
Please, and I know it's not a lot, but I have to insist. The next speaker is Mr. Daniel Attard, seat 383, please.
Thank you, Chair. If there's one thing that is very clear from this debate, it's this. Storms and climate change do not discriminate countries. I'm Maltese, and now we've been part of the EU for over 20 years. We still suffer from the same problem. An EU that discriminates countries because it does not take into consideration the realities of our own country. We are one island, one region, one country, and the rules that determine who is eligible for solidarity funding exclude us. So, I would like to say this. We do not want special treatment. We would like fair treatment. That's it. We are no less than other countries. We would like a European Union that puts everyone on equal footing because we are just the same as Spain, as Italy, and so on and so forth. But we need a non-discriminatory EU. Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Mr. Do Nascimento Sabral, seat 409, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Commissioner, this is a time for solidarity and not for political fighting, because people are still suffering. There are still farms that cannot be accessed. People's houses are flooded. We need the instruments and tools to provide support for those who need it. The dimension of the tragedies crosses borders, and that's why the response needs to be European. We're talking about the water resilience strategy. Now, that's good, but it needs resources. These resources can be found in the Common Agricultural Policy, which is why we need to mobilize the agricultural reserve now, right now. The Portuguese government did do this, and it did it well. There are other tools and other instruments, the Solidarity Fund, but time and reduced amounts are the main problem here. We shouldn't take funds from other areas, from cohesion, but from other funds where it can be spared.
Yes, Ms. Maria Grappini, seat 542, please.
Doamna președintă, doamna comisar.
Chair, Commissioner, we're discussing today about extreme weather events and floods in certain member states, but we know that such extreme events, whether it's earthquakes or droughts, well, we've seen this in every member state, and we need to show solidarity, and we need a European framework to deal with people's lives, because people's lives matter regardless of whether they live in Italy or in Romania or in Spain. So, Commissioner, I'd like you to tell me about the budget. We need a budget for repairs, for infrastructure, but do you have an allocated budget for prevention? Because we want to see fewer effects of these natural disasters every year, because otherwise, for a while, people will be facing with such disasters, so we need to have a budget for prevention in order not to see such natural disasters.
And the last speaker in Catch the Eye is Ms. Cynthia Muchu, seat 649, please.
Thank you, Commissioner. The scale of flooding caused by Storm Chandra in the southeast of Ireland last week placed an enormous burden on families, businesses and local councils across the region. Wicklow, Waterford, Wexford, Kilkenny, Carlow were hit with unprecedented rainfall resulting in severe flooding. Houses, parks and businesses were destroyed. I would appeal to the EU Commission to increase the EU Solidarity Fund and expand its terms of reference. Unfortunately, Europe will see more weather-related natural disasters every year, meaning a Solidarity Fund of 1.1 billion is no longer enough. A new and expanded Solidarity Fund should invest in new weather warning systems and flood defence infrastructure, in particular in the southeast of Ireland. EU solidarity must be more than a principle. It must deliver practical help to communities when they need it most. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your patience. As you know, we have a long agenda ahead of us and also some formal sittings later on. So I will now give the floor back to the Commission and Commissioner Labib to close the debate, please.
Madam Chair, honourable members, first of all, I would like to thank you for this very important debate. I consider that it is of utmost importance, and it highlights the following key areas and ideas. The world is different today, most vulnerable and more dangerous. Past policies no longer respond to the challenges of the present, and that is why in the Commission we are working diligently to improve our joint capacity to deal with these events, whether in prevention, preparedness, response and recovery. We need more robust instruments, better adapted to current scenarios, without silos and with all areas of government and of society. And that's why we presented last March a first ever Preparedness Union strategy based on whole of society, whole of government and all hazards approach, and climate change, extreme natural event is one of today's major threats. We want to work better and we want to support member states more and better, because if member states are the first responsible, the first to respond, the reality is that they are more and more overwhelmed by major disaster. Many of you raised the importance of solidarity fundings, and the EU Solidarity Fund set up to respond to major natural disaster after the severe floods in Central Europe in 2002 has been activated for over 140 disasters. This is European solidarity. And the aim of the fund is to help member states and accession countries to cope with the extraordinary budgetary pressure. After a disaster, a member state has 12 weeks after the occurrence of damage to apply for EU Solidarity Fund support. And the applicant member state can request the payment in advance up to 25%. This is a rapid solidarity response and no bureaucracy. And there is no specific criteria that can create a disadvantage for small member states like Malta. There are the same criteria for all applicants. Major natural disaster, total damage superior to 0.6% of gross national income. Regional disaster, total direct damage superior to 1.5% of gross domestic product of a region. And disaster in neighboring countries, any disaster in one country that is also a major natural disaster in another country. So same criteria for all member states. And when it comes to fundings again, the UCPM for the next MFF, we propose it to upgrade it more than 5 times with a proposal coming from the Commission, 10.7 billion. So I hope that I can count on this House for the negotiation of the next MFF. And as you know, in every crisis there is an equality dimension, and as for equality, I'm also a Commissioner for Equality. I can assure that there is a specific attention for the most vulnerable, women, children, and also the people with disabilities. And when it comes to communication in case of a crisis, I just visited yesterday the EU Space Agency, and we have their Galileo satellite navigator, which is one of the most efficient in the world. And thanks to this Galileo satellite system, we will be soon able to send messages to all European citizens in case of major crisis, even if there is a blackout or a complete shutdown. So, honourable members, hoping for the best is not a strategy, and this is why I'm personally, as the first Preparedness Commissioner, personally committed to take this work forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much for that, Commissioner Labib, and the debate is closed. The next item on the agenda is also a Commission statement, Building a Stronger European Defence in the light of an increasingly volatile international environment. And we just need to have a shift of commissioners, so we take a little bit of a break, not a real break, just a pause. Thank you very much. And